There they are. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, and Tekedra especially for joining me here tonight in LA. Waymo's been in LA now for a few months now, since October, not commercially operating, but touring around. I actually took a robo-taxi ride today, and it was really interesting because there was a car crash right in front of the robo-taxi that I was in. Not at all involving Waymo, by the way, but it was really interesting because it actually backed up after a few minutes, was able to sort of maneuver around and take me to my destination, kind of interesting to see how much it's changed since the early days when I was first in the vehicles, way, way back when it was just the little prototype, the little Firefly on definitely not a public street. So it was really interesting. I'm wondering how the reception has been here in LA since October.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, thank you. Thank you all. This is great. And also, I'm so glad you took a ride today. We launched here in October with this tour where we've been sort of touring different neighborhoods. And we have over 15,000 folks in Los Angeles who've taken rides so far. We've received a very warm welcome. And one of the biggest insights, I was talking to the team about this, is who's taking rides and what are they taking rides for? Because there is this, there's a newness factor, right? Like, are people really integrating it into their lives? Or is it like tourism and just something people are curious about? And so it was exciting to see that like 2,000 of those trips are like people going to very, very basic errands, right? That's going to run an errand in a Waymo is like using it for your life. Similarly, people are taking it to restaurants and bars at the same number, like 2,000 trips. And then 300 of the trips are people going to school, college, as well as K through 12. So we like that signal that people aren't just giving us a warm welcome, but they are really integrating it into their lives.
And that's here in LA, those
Here in
years.
LA.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. I got honked at, yelled at. A couple people wanted to experiment with the robo-taxi. And I'm curious how different populations, because you're in Phoenix commercially, you're in San Francisco commercially, here you're not able to charge for rides yet, and you're also in Austin. How are these different population centers different, and how they treat the robo-taxis?
Yeah. I love that question. So we've been in Phoenix the longest, as you know. We've been in Phoenix since 2017, but we've been offering a 24/7 fully autonomous ride-hailing service with no one behind the wheel. For those of you who don't have context for Waymo, it's a service, ride-hailing. The Waymo driver takes you where you want to go. There's no human in the car sitting behind the wheel. So when it pulls up, you use the Waymo app, it pulls up, you either sit in the passenger seat or in the back seat, and it takes you where you want to go. And so in Phoenix, we're in 225 square miles. It includes the Sky Harbor International Airport, so you can fly in, download the app, take a Waymo to downtown or Tempe or Scottsdale. So there, it's integrated into the fabric of the community. And so when we expanded our territory to include ASU, like all of those students, first, they're digital natives, but then second, they're already accustomed to taking some mode of transportation home from the bar or to wherever they're going. And so they just immediately integrated it into their lives. So it's been a very, very long time where people have been seeing the Waymo cars. The number of people, when I go to Phoenix, those cars pull up at the airport, someone gets in, someone's getting out, someone's getting in. Like, it's really exciting to see. San Francisco, we offer the service in all of the sort of 50 square miles of San Francisco. It's a more challenging and dynamic city, both from a technological development perspective, right? You have cyclists, you have pedestrians, you have double parked cars and deliveries, and there's a lot. You have mountains, you have fog. And so we have always taken sort of a safety-first approach, engaging with the communities, getting feedback. So when we showed up in San Francisco, we were able to leverage everything we'd learned in Phoenix. And one of the things we've learned is getting feedback directly from the community for what service would be most valuable in their lives. And so we really selected, we ended up with about 200,000 people signing up on our wait list, and then over time taking people off the wait list and really prioritizing different use cases so that we could learn early how people would value the service. And so that's been tremendously exciting. We give tens of thousands of rides every week between San Francisco and Phoenix, and it's growing every week. So it's very exciting.
So to me, though, it's hard to ignore the tension that happens in San Francisco. I mean, a group of people lit one of the robotaxis on fire, and that hasn't happened in Phoenix as far as I know. So yes, there's clearly demand there. You mentioned 200,000 people on the wait list. I don't know how many people are off that wait list now. There's clearly a demand there, but how are you dealing with this there is a group out there in San Francisco specifically that seems very opposed to robotaxis. Can you win them over?
Yeah, I think as it relates to sort of vandalism and arson, people commit crimes against property. And unfortunately, we've experienced that. I'm still super hopeful that everyone in San Francisco will come along for this ride with us. But even that aside, the reason we exist is to offer trusted, safe transportation to people. And the reality is, especially in COVID, the number of preventable deaths in San Francisco on the streets rose like most cities around the country. 40,000 people not making it home for dinner, to us, is entirely unacceptable. And so I think the people who focus on whatever it is they don't like about whether it's tech or specific to autonomous vehicles aren't really thinking about whether or not it's worth the benefit to society. And we're just going to stay focused on that. And so when you say specifically around the arson, that's disappointing, but every policymaker is on our side, right? No one wants to see that happen. And so we're going to obviously continue to be very vigilant on those cases, but we're going to keep our attention on those people who need a way to get around, all the people who will never have a driver's license, either because they have epilepsy or another limitation, or because they've aged out and they can't drive anymore. And so there's this, it's a privilege to object because you have options. And what we're not going to do is get lost in that debate, because we know there are people who don't have good options who need this option.
Are you committed so much to San Francisco that even if, forget about the regulatory question, because obviously if one of the two main agencies, the DMV and or the California Public Utilities Commission, were to pull a permit, you wouldn't be able to operate. Putting that aside, if there was continued and repeated sort of vandalism around this, will you still stay committed to San Francisco because of what you just said, or would you have to make a decision to just go to a different marketplace?
Yeah, I don't even spend any time thinking about if lawlessness would run us out of town. I just think that would be such a sad state of affairs for such a progressive city. And so we're committed to staying in San Francisco. We're committed to going to places like Los Angeles, like San Francisco. Austin is our next location that have transportation pain points and opportunity for the Waymo driver to help solve those.
Circling back to LA, I think you're about to wrap up this tour. You said there were 200,000 people on the wait list in San Francisco. LA, I know, is a little bit of a different thing because you're going to different neighborhoods. So what's the demand that you're seeing just in those different communities since you've been here since October?
Yeah, since October, we've had 50,000 people sign up for our wait list. As I said earlier, over 15,000 trips to tens of thousands of folks because people bring their friends. We actually have a rider, George, who lives in Santa Monica, who's 80, who considers himself a techie, and he can't drive. And so he's been one of our avid riders. And then we have another rider who's actually joined us at every stop on our tour in LA. And what he does is he brings his friends who are skeptics, so he can sort of get them over their skepticism. And so this is part of why we show up and give people the opportunity to experience the Waymo driver for themselves. One thing, there's a lot of people talking in the back, so they won't hear me, but for all of you sitting in the front, one thing I just want to say, it's like my little bit of like my Oprah moment, which is like we are giving codes to all of you, so you can all enjoy Waymo rides this weekend in Los Angeles. So thank you for listening, and you get a ride, and you get a ride, and you get a ride, and you get a ride.
Look under your chair. Just kidding.
But we'll follow up and get you the codes.
Yeah, I think that we'll either communicate it through TechCrunch or StrictlyVC or something like that. We'll get them to you. So based on what you know now in Los Angeles, you're wrapping up the tour. Can we expect you to come back? Is it a city that is worth commercially launching it? Not just building, community building, I mean actually commercially launching from what you know now.
Definitely. And the reason we came is because we knew that. And the reason we'll stay is because we've received a warm welcome. You know, there's, like you said, we have to get our permits. We're not charging for rides right now. We will, as we did in San Francisco, expand our service before we start charging. And I mean, you know, it's like we sort of show up and you get to experience this for a couple of months or several months without paying. And then we have that moment of truth, which we went through in San Francisco, which is we start charging. And then we figure out how many people have really integrated it into their lives, what's the price point they're willing to pay. And what we learned in San Francisco is people are so excited that there's no hurdle. Now it's just a public service and they can just take the rides whenever they want. And so definitely intend to stay in Los Angeles. I mean, it is one of the most dynamic sort of transportation cities in the world, right? You have sort of only a handful that are this complex.
I was thinking earlier today, like, what does a successful robotaxi service look like in each city? And one thing that we haven't talked too much about in the past is where does profitability fall in that metric? Because, okay, let's say you're providing transportation, great, tick that box. People accept it. Maybe there's a metric where you actually help like reduce crashes or something like that. But you can't do that forever. So where is the profitability piece? And how far away are you from that, let's say in Phoenix, where you've been there for quite some time?
Yeah. So my time thinking about, which is how to build a sustainable, profitable business. And so all the steps we're taking are part of that. Obviously, I can't get into any specifics, but there are, you know, the sort of transportation opportunity in Los Angeles is $2 billion. There's ample room to build a profitable business in Los Angeles if you approach it the right way, and we're certainly focused on doing that. Same thing with San Francisco, and same thing with Phoenix. You know, expanding in Phoenix was a really critical part of that because initially we were in Chandler. Obviously, we needed to move to downtown. Incorporating the airport is critical. And then getting all of those areas, Scottsdale, where so many people come into the Phoenix area and they're kind of in Scottsdale or in downtown. So you're seeing us make the moves that you have to make to build a profitable business.
Do you think
long-term, sustainable, profitable business?
Right. To be profitable, do you have to unlock the airports? Is that like a key physical piece to that?
It depends on the city. It really depends on the city. I think when you're talking about a city like San Francisco, you can certainly do it without an airport because it's, you know, sort of unusually high demand in that city, as well as community that's become quite accustomed to paying high fees for transportation.
Well, and a train, right? That you can get on the BART from the airport, and so there is a way, right?
But for some cities, certainly airports will be required from earlier in our launch.
the airport piece is interesting to me because you may or may not have known, but there's an application right now that is expanding the footprint of San Francisco. And in that application, it showed going into parts of San Mateo County, which just so happens, I mean, you don't outline it, but if you look at it, you're like, oh, the airport, right? So can we expect more of that in the San Francisco area? Like, talk to me a little bit about how that footprint might grow. What's the 1 to 2 year plan for that area?
Yeah, so that permit that we've applied for is so that we can not only be in the full sort of San Francisco mainland, but also expand, as you said, to the airport, as well as adjacent areas. It's because we see where riders might be interested in going, not only because we do actual sort of interviews with some of our riders, but also there's an intent opportunity in the app. And so we are interested in going to places where people who are sort of leaning. So you can expect to see that. You've already seen it in our permit application. You know, it's been a process, I think, where people can follow along in California to our business plans because we really have to delineate this in the permitting process.
I want to get through a couple of questions because I know we're going down on time a little bit, but I would be remiss to not bring up who's been watching or has any interest in autonomous vehicles at all. What has happened since October 2nd to now? I think some people were quite shocked. I mean, how quickly that company really had a bit of demise to them, and now they're trying to build back that trust. So you were watching, you probably had some people who had worked at Cruise and were at Waymo. What did you learn specifically from how that all went down? And did you change anything internally?
Yeah, I think it was an opportunity for us as a company to feel very humble, right? Because we're all here trying to make the roads safer. Like, that's what we're doing. And so whenever something awful happens to someone, there's no rejoicing in that. So that was first. As far as our approach to safety, that's been sort of foundational for us from the beginning. Deep engagement with regulators and policymakers at every level. I mean, this is my background. That's always been foundational to how we function. Being transparent with the communities in which we drive. I mean, we published 20 safety papers last year. Like, we are always exposing the lack of perfection in what we are doing. We want to build confidence by being transparent, but not by suggesting that we're perfect, because it's just not setting expectations in the right place. So we didn't learn specifically from them, but it was a challenging moment, sort of like what happened, which is just that we have to stay very humble. And you have to take an iterative approach. And it's okay if it feels to the outside world like it's taking too long, or like you're not cool enough, or like, because like lives are at stake. And so I think it was like a real good opportunity for everyone to look at each other and say, like, there have been moments where this has been really hard, and it's gonna stay hard. Certainly what you're saying, after, you know, this kind of thing happens, regulators are even more nervous. But our team is committed to doing this safely and thoughtfully, and so that's what we're going to keep doing.
What I've found interesting is I've been writing about Waymo before it was Waymo, and it was Google Self-Driving Project, and I kind of feel like we've come in this weird full circle where it was just kind of Google Self-Driving Project and a lot of research projects happening at Carnegie Mellon, and then this huge hype cycle with all these startups. And now we're back to like just a handful. So I'm wondering, like, what is your prediction? Do you think that more will either fail or be consolidated, or do you think that there will be some more competition moving forward?
I definitely think there will be competition if we think about like a 5 to 10 year time horizon. Because I think that we're just seeing the speed of AI and ML, right? And there will be people who solve these challenges. It's just going to take a long time, and it requires a lot of capital to get there.
So were you relieved or neutral to when the secret, not so secret Apple Car project is apparently dead now?
I was neutral because who knows what that means.
Fair, fair. All right, well, last question. Just two quick questions. One, very quickly, how many humans does it take to sort of have a single robotaxi on the road?
So less than a human, less than one human, because we have rider support. So if you're in a car, there's a group of humans, but they're not one-to-one. And so if you push the button and you say, hey, why did the car do this? Or today, actually, the example you had, is the car going to back up or am I going to be stuck behind this accident? Or I think I left my purse in the last car I was in. So that's a critical one. And then we do have remote assistance, but it's also not one-to-one with the cars. And those are when the car has a question. So if that accident wasn't an accident, but instead it had been like a mattress in the middle of the street that doesn't have wheels and isn't moving, then there is an opportunity for the car to ask for support. But there's no ability for anyone outside of the car to drive the car, take over the car, tell the car what to do. It is driving based on its own semantic understanding of the environment.
All right, so here's the billion-dollar question. Obviously, it takes humans to support this. It takes a lot of money to build this up and develop it. And so what does Waymo need to do to get to the next level? How much money does it need? And to reach that kind of capital, do you foresee Waymo potentially spinning out and having an IPO? I saved the best for last.
Right. It's actually really an easy one for me because I don't have anything to say about whether or not we're going to IPO. But I mean, really at the heart of your question is, what do we need to do? We need to keep doing what we did in 2023, which is make the service real in more people's everyday lives, which is why we're excited about what's happening right here in LA and why we're really excited about what's to come in Austin.
Good answer. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tekedra. And we'll get those codes to you.